Hello everyone, Happy New Year. This is Lisa from thechristiansinglewoman.com, and just wanted to make this video to talk about a topic that so many single women struggle with, and I recently received a request to actually talk about it. So it's something that I wanted to tackle, and it is, the notion that God told me this was my husband. There have been so many times where I've heard women utter these words only to see the guy date and then marry another woman, and they're just heartbroken and devastated. So I wanted to outline a few tips in this video to kind of help you walk through this process. Not by any means saying, do 1, 2, 3 and poof, you'll know if it's from God, but kind of going through some things to help you kind of understand whether or not you're hearing from God or it's something else. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I would say is, can you recognize God's voice? Do you have a thriving relationship with God whereby you have a proven track record of hearing from God and then seeing those things come to pass? That would be a significant clue if you had some past experience with this, because you would know God's voice. You'd be able to recognize His voice when He speaks to you. In John chapter 10, it says, my sheep know my voice. And so this is not a criticism, but rather if you don't know how to recognize God's voice and recognize when He's speaking to you, then you need to spend some time with Him trying to understand more about, how and when He speaks to you. And that's not to say that He will speak to you in the same way each time, but that will allow you to start seeing some patterns and get a better understanding of His voice. And so one way that I would recommend to start learning those patterns and learning how to recognize God's voice would be to begin journaling. Write down all of your thoughts, your prayers, desires, those things that you believe that you are hearing from God, and then go back and record, the result. How was it answered? How did it become resolved? And kind of just walk through that process, and it'll allow you to start seeing some patterns and be able to understand, well, God told me this, or I heard this, and this occurred, and so on and so forth. And so definitely would recommend journaling as a way to kind of help you start clarifying some of those voices. The next I would recommend is to pray and remain silent. So you definitely want to pray about the situation, ask God to, clarify your thoughts and your feelings, but also remain silent, in that recognizing that prayer is a two-way communication channel. And so just spend some time listening and waiting on a response from God, as opposed to just, rushing back to your to-do list. So pray and remain silent, but then also as a part of remain silent is, don't tell your family and friends, and not just because, you don't know if this is from God, but because you don't want them or yourself trying to make things happen. You want to sit back and allow God to cause the right things to happen, rather than you trying to make some things happen. And so you have to remember that God is a God in order, which means that the man will be the one to initiate the relationship. So don't try to make things happen. Just wait for God to cause the right things to happen. Okay. The next thing I would suggest is to give this desire back to God. It could be that you have recognized some characteristics in this man that you would like to see in your husband. But at any rate, you want to, give these desires back to God and allow Him to mold them into His desires. You want to make sure that you're operating in His will and not your will. I would recommend that you read the story of Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1, where she was dealing with a similar situation and being barren, and how she went through this process of dedicating the child she was yet to have back to God. And so you have to recognize that your marriage is a ministry. And so you want to make sure that you are dedicating that ministry to God so that it can be used for His glory. And so, dedicate this back to Him, this desire back to Him, so that it no longer becomes yours but his, and allow him to just mold it into whatever it would be and whatever he would have it to be. And then finally, I would say, and continue to say this, I cannot say it enough, but if you desire to be married, you should definitely be spending some time preparing to be a wife. We have to remember that we are not going to say I do and just magically know what it takes to be a wife. We've got to spend some time preparing and learning what it takes to be a Christian wife, learning what it takes to develop a strong Christian marriage. So I'm not going to repeat all of those recommendations in this video, but if you want to know more about some things you can do to start preparing to be a wife, you can check out my video entitled Tips for the Christian Single Woman. That will give you some more information as it relates to that. So those are my 4 tips to kind of help you walk through this process. I know this is a very difficult and confusing situation for a lot of single women. I do not take it lightly. Know that I am praying both for you and with you, that God will bring you clarity as it relates to the situation. But I hope you will find these tips helpful in helping you to kind of walk through this process to clarify some things in your mind. So thanks so much for tuning in. And even if it turns out that this particular guy is not your husband, I just want to remind you that God's no is always a yes to something better. So just know that your best is yet to come. Be blessed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.